and welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on-the-air source for all information about your library. Tonight, I'm filling in for Tricia Nowak. My name is Stacy Peterson, and I'm in the programming department. And our very special guest is local historian Norman Kelly. Tonight, we're going to talk about 10 influential people who came from Peoria. But before we get started, I need to tell you a little bit about our guest. Norm is really no stranger to the library. He has frequented the local history section of our library. He's written many books relying on our resources, and in turn, he's donated the sales of those books to provide things for our library, like the generator for our fantastic bookmobile.
Yeah, I remember that.
He's been a fantastic speaker, not only for the library in our Body Peoria History series, but he's also been incredibly popular with groups like Ollie, as well as private events. He is self-published. He has a blog that he writes very frequently. You can also find him in News and Views magazine, Illinois Adventurer. He is a frequent guest on Thursday mornings on Breakfast with Royce and Roger, as well as an adopted member, I'd say, of the Red Nose Gang on Sunday mornings on the radio. So we're happy that he slowed down just enough so he could come and visit with us and tell us about these 10 influential people from Peoria. Thanks for coming, Norm.
Thanks for asking me. Oops, I'm going to shake this table again.
Shake it up. We're okay with it.
All right.
So I know that you've got a lot of people on your list, and I know that we can talk about people for hours on end.
It's true.
We are going to start with somebody who people may take for granted a little bit. I know that when I moved to Peoria, I was running in the steamboat race, and I would run by this guy's statue every year, and later I found out about his importance. And we are going to start off by talking about Mr. Robert Ingersoll. And I'll get a picture on here of his statue.
If you go through some more, huh?
We're going to come back. We're going to backtrack a little
good.
bit.
All right.
There we go. There's Robert Ingersoll. Tell us about him.
Well, first of all, that statue was put up there in 1911, and he was here way back in 1857. Why would he come to Peoria? And a brilliant lawyer.
Now, he was an East Coaster, correct?
Yeah, New York.
Okay.
And he and his brother, Egan or some name, I don't know. He never got famous enough. And he just had a practice here. He was the most marvelous narrator and orator, and just beyond his elegance, was beyond anybody's imagination. And when they were in his presence, they were awed by him. And he knew it, of course. But he was an international person. He also spoke at political conventions. I suppose the average person, if they heard the name, they might say, well, oh yeah, he's that agnostic.
Right.
Now, can you imagine a brilliant person like this, a magnificent writer and orator, is known as, oh yeah, he's that agnostic, which is a shame. And to get in with people, he wrote a book called Why I Am an Agnostic. But he was a seeker of truth. He was just so brilliant in his talking and became famous at conventions where he would introduce big timers. And when the war came along, Civil War, he made himself a colonel. That's simple. He wrote the Secretary of Defense and requested that he form an army, and he did in Peoria, Illinois. We had two camps here, Camp Peoria and Camp Lyon. One was in the Glen Oak Park, and the other was out in the Heights by the Prospect.
And tell me where the monument is that commemorates this in Glen Oak Park. I understand there's one there.
It's not in the park.
Where is it?
It's across the street. There's a little thing there where I don't know what it is, but I guess it was like a kind of a large water fountain. And then directly across from that, you'll see that.
Okay.
And then he took his army and they trained, and they went over to Iowa and trained. And then as soon as they got in the first battle, they were all surrounded and taken prisoner. And so here come Ingersoll walking back home one day. And they said, where's your army? And he said, well, they've been dispersed in other camps, which I don't think was true. And they asked him, well, how did you get out? And he said, well, that the colonel paroled me. And of course, the haters of Ingersoll, and there were people, they just figured that he bought his way out. Then he ended up going to New York and ended up dying there in about 1899. And his remains are in the Washington, D.C. cemetery.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so he was a Civil War person. He certainly was no hero.
Now, I understand his brother lived here until his own death, and Robert Ingersoll came back for that funeral.
And said the most beautiful words that anybody's ever heard. And you really must go to the library and just simply say, what have you got on Ingersoll? And be sure to read the things that I've quoted about him. He was an incredible person. I named him Peoria's most famous person.
Now, would we find that information on Ingersoll in your personal file? Because I think, to my knowledge, you are the only individual person who has his own file in the local history section.
They call it a vertical file.
A vertical file, yes.
And before I'm dead and gone, I'm going to, everything that I have, hard copies, there are a lot of them down there, but I have 300 or 400 more.
Yes.
And I
Wonderful.
put them in large envelopes, and then you can look and see what you want. But it's all mixed up, so don't think it's going to be all.
But if people hear something that they find interesting, they certainly might want to go down and see all this incredible research that you've done on your own.
You say to Deb or Amber, "Where's Norm's file?" And
That's
they'll
right.
say,
Or Chris.
That's
Yep.
right. That's right.
They will all send you down there.
They know where it is. And I thank Betty, because she's the one who really got me on the path. And of course, all the ladies that worked there throughout the period, 32 years.
We are very fortunate to have a wonderful staff who really knows what they have down there to get people paired with what they need.
We work together a lot. A lot of people email me, and then if I know it, I'll send whatever I have. If not, then I ask Deb to look it back up.
Certainly.
And so they're working with me and the library. But this way, I think I take some of the casual calls off of there, because they get a lot of calls.
They get a lot of calls.
We better
Now,
move those.
Let's move on.
I'm going to get rid of Ingersoll.
Our next person who we're going to focus on is somebody, even though he's long gone, he has impacted my life every single day, because not a day goes by when I do not read the Peoria Journal-Star.
That's right.
It is the source of local information for our community, and that would not be around had it not been for our next person, Mr. Eugene Baldwin.
That's right. 1864 and 1914 he finally died. And Eugene came here, just broke, and magnificent writer, wonderful editor, and he stayed here trying to get a job, and he did. And he became an editor of a paper that's long gone. But it wasn't long after that he founded the Star, and he founded the Journal.
Two
Imagine
papers at that time.
You wouldn't believe it, at one time we actually had 17 newspapers.
So we had like a morning, a mid-morning, a noon, a 1 o'clock, a 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7
Weekly,
o'clock.
monthly, all kinds of handout things.
Wow.
But we got down to a
Wow.
point where we really had like 7 in town, and they were cutthroat. They really battled each other. And Eugene Baldwin could cut you in a million pieces.
Yeah.
He was so brilliant, so smart. We called him the philosopher. And he had a daughter named Sydney who almost shamed him. She was so brilliant.
Also a writer.
Oh, beyond.
Right.
A world traveler all over the world. She wrote, in my opinion, and she wrote a couple other things. Wherever she went, she sent it right back here, because she was 51% owner.
Oh my goodness.
Very few
Sure.
people knew that. Sydney, and I wrote a really wonderful story about her, because what I did, I wrote that as if she wrote a letter back home. It's the first time I
nice.
ever did that. My editor really loved that, but I can't really do it all the time. But she was so brilliant. And then he was, after, because a lot of people hated you give your opinion, believe me, people hate your guts. They do.
Or they adore you.
One or the other.
Right.
And so this lawyer confronted him out in the street and pushed him. And I think it was more of a push. But anyway, ended up in the hospital, and he died.
And he was advanced. I mean, he was 74 when
That's
that
right.
happened.
And we wanted him, meaning when I say we, I mean the people.
Yeah.
We wanted him tried for murder. But the coroner's inquest has to have a reason for your death, and the physician said, because he died 9 or 10 days later, they said it was an infection in the kidney or something. They needed it to say it was some type of blunt trauma.
Right.
But anyway, seriously, Eugene Baldwin and all of the people early on brought these newspapers, and we really, because of our newspapers and the things we said and the things we covered, he was truly up there, almost with Ingersoll. But in a stand-up talk, you would soon be walking away from Baldwin and going right straight over to.
Well, his mark was indelible on Peoria even to this day.
Yes.
Now, another guy that we're going to cover, and I'm interested to hear why you picked this. Peoria, when it was a wide open town, was no stranger to wheeler and dealers.
Oh,
but
yeah.
you picked a particular one, Harry Frazee.
That's
Tell
right.
us about him.
Well, you know, he was born way back in like 1880. And he was a kid here, and we had the most beautiful opera house, one of the top 5 most beautiful ones in the city of Peoria. And he hung around there.
As a kid?
Yeah.
Oh.
He loved the theater and all the beautiful women and all the activity. And he was a hustler. And he made sure if you were going to be star, you met Harry.
Wow.
If you're coming in there, where's my purse? Well, Harry would say, here it is. I mean, that's who he was.
Yeah.
17 years old, he takes off for Chicago. And what do you think he does? He ends up buying the Red Sox. You know,
Wow.
what do they call them? Boston
Right.
Red Sox? I don't know much about it.
Right.
And who was on that team? Babe Ruth. And you can look this up on the library, and it's called Harry's Affair with the Babe.
Oh,
Trying to make you
fantastic.
think this was really something, but what it really was, then he sold the whole team. He was insane about theaters and bought one in Chicago and quickly named it after himself. He was a wild drinker. In fact, one man said Harry Frazee never took a sober breath in his life. But drunk, he was 50% better than any one of the people that ever got into this business.
Oh, my God.
So when somebody says that, of course, I might quickly add he died in 1929, so that would be...
Wow, short life.
Yes, well, of course. Died of liver trouble.
Yeah.
And Harry bought the show No No Nanette.
Of course, famous.
Very. And he, that's what he did constantly, buying, selling, buying, selling. They called him the evil genie from Peoria.
Oh, I like
he
that.
he was just incredible and a very handsome man. We can't show the camera, but you can see that he's a pretty handsome man.
Handsome,
you
for
know
certain.
what I mean?
That's true.
Harry Frazee, truly alive today, doing what he did. Why, he'd be on the national news constantly. And in those days, he was just a wild guy. Was having a wonderful time, and they buried him in a celebrity-type cemetery with a lot of big stars and so forth in it. But Harry Frazee, truly a remarkable person, loved to have known him.
Yeah, sounds like a suitable representative for the vaudevillian circuit from Peoria.
He wouldn't be sitting down with the last 2 guys we talked to. If he did, he probably would sell their images or something.
Well, while we're talking about entertainment, we have to talk about a song that has been very popular in Peoria, our all-American city,
That's right.
and a gentleman who is kind of entwined with that song,
That's
Mr.
right.
Paul LaRocca.
Paul LaRocca, a vaudevillian, absolute major star.
Right.
Women loved him. He went around the United States. He came from a musical family, international violinist and oboist, or whatever they call it, or viola. How do I know what they really played? But all these instruments, but he decided that he was going to sing, and he did. And the song that you're talking about is I Wished. There's a T on the end of it.
Right.
I wished I was in Peoria.
Yes.
Now, here he claimed that there's a man there that listened all the time and bought him a beer once in a while. And he said what he really did was steal my song. Well, if you heard Smothers Brothers, they did Wished I Was in Peoria. Well, you know, it's wild song. And I don't like it, and my wife doesn't either, because they said you can pick a Glory up on the street or something. That, of course, that line had to do with
Glory
prostitution.
being your wife, of
and
course.
that line absolutely has to do with prostitution, I can guarantee that. So it was a wild-bodied song. Now I want you to read what Paul wrote, and the name of it was Peoria.
Peoria,
Ready?
yes. I've traveled all around and seen most every town, But I'm right here to state that we live in one town great. Although we have no Broadway, our main street's mighty gay, and don't forget our scenery, the best in the USA.
No, I don't know the tune.
I don't know the tune.
Be interesting, wouldn't it? Why doesn't some musician, and I know a lot of them, right? Why don't they do it? And because he never copyrighted it. And so I think we could have fun with that. But it's so what is it, square?
Yeah, the word that I think you used to describe it best was corny.
Corny.
Corny. It's a little corny.
And Peoria was corny. And
Parts of Peoria was
exactly.
corny.
And our base here,
Yes.
they were all rural folk, of course, prairie people. But Paul was a barber in town, and he would work as a barber, and then he would take off with the vaudevillians, you know. In Peoria, we had a couple of hotels we built for them. We had theaters, Apollo Theater, for instance, and some of the other halls, Roos Hall, and even the Madison, later, because these are all 1920.
Sure.
The acts that came here, I'm going to say it one more time, and I'm not saying it anymore. Will It Play in Peoria has nothing to do with vaudeville. 1942, an ad agency man came here from New York City, realizing we're so diversified, and if we can sell it here in Peoria, Illinois, we can sell it anywhere. You got that? Yep. I am sick and tired of hearing people connect it with the vaudevillians, because this was the Mecca. If you're a vaudevillian, this is where you want to be. Yeah. Well, I want to go to New York. No, you don't. Why? Because Peoria, we catered to you. We had the soft drink parlors. This is over 200 of them, and live acts, and we wanted you to come, and we took excellent care of you. I don't think any one of them ever bought a meal. I mean, the stars.
Certainly.
And drink. Why? Because we took care of you. Now, you want to take off on an adventure in 1920 and head for Chicago? Why do you want to do that? And if you got up there, you'd have a big theater.
Yeah.
But 19 blocks and 29 and 61 blocks away, but not Peoria.
Not Peoria.
They're all here. So Paul LaRocca wrote other songs. He wrote a song about FDR. He was very, very famous. And I'll tell you, the women loved him.
They loved him. Well,
but that's Paul. Oh, you already read that.
No, we're good, and we've got a few more to go. But I want to go to one of our most well-known mayors. I want to make sure we've got enough time. We're about halfway through, and we are going to talk about a man. They named a high school after him, Mayor Woodruff.
Yeah, his name was Edward Nelson Woodruff, and of course, as a kid, you go to political rallies, which I did. You know, and there he was, and there the other guys were, and it was wild. It was arguments and fun, and the kids just ran around and pushed people, you know. But Edward Nelson, he was our mayor 11 different times for 24 years. 42 years he was active in politics. He is the one who made us what we were, whether you don't like it, whether you did like it. He accepted the fact there will always be vice in a city.
Yes.
Why not make those people pay for the privilege? And so if you opened up a little gambling place or had your slots, prostitute, I don't care what you had.
Yeah.
We got anywhere from 76 to 93,000 a year on this so-called funny money. And it wasn't funny. It was all up above board, paid into the clerk's office. Tuesday nights they argued about it. I can fill this thing with all the
minutes are
quotes.
entertaining to read. They are really good.
I would say that Richard Pryor, in a face-to-face, couldn't even come close to as funny as Mr. Woodruff was. And he could cut you so deep. And he had a bum boat, just a little old boat up the stream up there, all these people in there. But he was truly a remarkable man, born in 1862 and died in 1947. He was honest. He was wealthy because he had a nice company, had a wonderful daughter, and he lavished his money on these lavish homes. Yeah, he lived up on North Monroe, and he finally decided to move, so he built a place across the street.
I read that.
He was a real, but he truly, he alone, he is Peoria.
Yes.
Any questions you have about Peoria, he would answer them.
Now, before we move on to the next person, is he buried in Springdale?
Yes.
And did he have a petard sculpture
I don't think he did.
He might not have. One of these folks did.
I don't think he did.
You know, we
I know about those guys.
Those guys are, and their work is all over town and Springdale.
Absolutely.
Probably a couple more, and then we've got to get to the Sheltons, which I know everybody likes. But let's go to somebody who I thought was really interesting, Chief Coy.
Chief Coy.
Chief Coy.
His name was Robert Coy.
Yeah.
And you can look this up on the library thing called Man of Steel, because he was an Iron Man, a strong man, and he pulled cars with his teeth, turned them over. He put a rope under his neck and towed the trucks around town. He had marathon, ran barefooted. He had every kind of boxing, wrestling record. He held it, and also a memory like a steel trap. He could all the 50 states and the capital, nutty things, but he could do it. And I think though he was going to go on the $64,000 question.
Yes.
But Robert was hit by his dad when he was in his crib with a fist. Imagine that, and his eye drooped and his mouth drooped and he kind of drooled. And if you saw him, which I did certainly, you know, you wouldn't want to stop and talk. But if you did, you would have a wonderful, gentle person. And I worked for a lawyer, and of course, when Bob saw him, he always yelled at him because he always was given a $5 bill or a $10 bill. He was not a bum. He worked in other jobs, but he also delivered advertising placards, which he put in the thing. And he stopped and talked to people. A very, very religious person, a writer. He was phenomenal. Had he been an ordinary guy without the injury, serious. This man would have really gone places, but he didn't.
Yeah,
he had to
it's
stay
unfortunate.
here.
And it also sounds like he was a stranger to nobody, had a lot of friends, yet lived solo in the Jefferson Hotel to the end of his life. So,
and he was big, you know, and if anything was going on in the street, I mean, he would be the first one to step right up between you.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't want to hit
a friend
this
that
man.
You want to know.
Yeah, this guy.
Now, there are a couple of guys that you really wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with, and I want to make sure we hit them. Because people always ask about this, the Sheltons, and certainly, I'm going to turn it over to you because there are a lot of stories out there about the Sheltons.
And anyone who reads my stuff knows that he was not a gangster.
Correct.
What is a gangster? Gangster's Al Capone. Al Capone's vicious, horrifying people, with machine gun fire. And Bernie Shelton is supposed to have been a member of the bloodiest gang in Illinois. Okay. I don't care. And that guy that wrote the story, everybody in the library said, well, you talked to Norm Kelly, you know, he'll feel. He didn't come talk to me because, you see, he had his premise all set up, and that's what he wrote about. But then when he came to Peoria, Illinois, he went there. And that's what he saw, and you understand he didn't want to talk to me because I know Bernie Shelton as close as you can, because I talked to a minimum of 24 people, including people like Zach Monroe, who knew him personally, Jack Purcher, because Bernie had a horse named Major, and he kept it out of Purcher Stables. They named a street after Purcher.
Yes.
And he came here in 1941, scared, apparently. I don't know. Maybe he was a horrifying person. He came out of jail when he got here, could not get a liquor license. So don't be telling me that he had all these places, because he didn't. And he had no money, Stacy.
Oh, my.
And his brother was with him. And so he comes into 1941. The war is not quite going on yet. And of course, naturally he wants to make a living, so he gets in gambling. Ooh, isn't that shocking? They're all gangsters. Well, my uncles, my brother, the people of Peoria, the men and some of the women, everybody gambled in some place. We had 242 taverns, 9 flat-out casinos. And to say that this pug, this thug, this ex-convict, took over gambling in Peoria. These are established businessmen, Stacy, with money. And they were not going to let anybody come in and do anything. You couldn't spit on the street. That's what I read. Yeah. What a joke. And, you know, and was he a nice guy? A lot of people said he was. Would he hurt you? I guess so, because we had all kinds of people get hurt in our town. It was a rough, scary place. And I also just wrote an article, and what I did was list about 12 of these so-called gangsters and really told you the truth about them. Well, at any rate, how many seconds we got?
We've got a couple minutes
Okay,
left.
I got to hurry this up. So when Bernie then established, he was connected with the Red Onion, was just a dump. You wouldn't let your dog walk in there. And then he had another place called the Sports Palace. He didn't. And I looked up and didn't even recognize the names of the people who had the liquor license. You get it?
Yeah, I get it.
And who was the liquor commissioner? Woodruff. You think Woodruff was, never mind. He was a laugh at him. But then he established with his brother Carl, who was supposed to be the brains of the outfit. Yeah, the brains, all right. Anyway, he had the Shelton place, and that you could go there and get gambling paraphernalia. And they had the pretty girls, you could have them dice girls, and it was an amusement company, which exists today under another name. And they had shuffleboards and even jukebox and a few slots. Anybody in this town who thinks Bernie Shelton was the big kingpin in slot machines have no concept what they're talking about. Anyway, we never thought slot machines were gambling anyway. It's just silly stuff. But we had serious gambling in there.
We had several serious gamblers, that's for certain. Well, as always, Norm, we could talk for hours.
Sad because
this.
we didn't get him killed yet, did we?
No, we didn't get to the
That's where he was killed,
but that's
though.
going to be for another
Okay.
time. And if anybody wants to go to that place, they can certainly go down to Farmington Road, where the Kenny's West Side Tap
Kenny's
is,
West Side Tap.
and that is the scene of where that happened. But
That's
the
right.
good thing is that all of your stories are available at any time of the day or night
That's
at
right.
PeoriaPublicLibrary.org under local history. You can read all of these stories. People can pick up News and Views or Outdoor Illinois Adventurer and find that information
Even
there.
Art and Society.
Art and Society, you're a featured writer. We have your hard copies, certainly in local history.
IBI.
So we're always able to see a little bit of Norm any day of the week. As always, we thank you for coming out.
That's fun.
We love having you, Norm.
Too bad you can't afford to keep me here 3 hours.
I know we'd break the bank
I know
for
you would.
certain, but
Thanks.
we would love to do it. Now you can catch all of our programs on PeoriaPublicLibrary.org, where you can find the latest events at all of our branches, or you can sign up for a digital newsletter, or pick up one of our paper newsletters of passages at any of our library branch locations. Until next time, thanks for visiting the Peoria Public Library.